Okay, well, thank you, Chris. You talk about your brother a lot, but you forget that I'm also your brother, but from a different mother. So anyway, many of you know that I do apologetics, and you might ask, so why are you speaking on flat Earth? Well, because there are a few people, even believers, that believe that the Earth really is flat. So I'm going to talk about that. You'll notice all of my talks are actually on my own website. You know, I do the apologeticsforum.org website. That's all the other speakers that come. But all of my speaking is captured on my website. And for the Flat Earth talk, there are notes on the website as well at that website address. Now, there's a piece of paper on the middle that I've got 10 different topics I'm going to cover there. And you might want to capture some of the highlights of each one of those 10. So getting into this talk, why I'm doing that, I've run into people that do believe in a flat earth. We've had visitors to this church. We have had, I know of people in some other churches in the area who believe in a flat earth. So I call it the flat earth phenomenon. And so what I'm going to do is present the evidence for a spherical earth and the evidence for a flat earth. And then you decide whether it's flat or not. So that's my approach. You might recognize some of the speakers on the right there. We've had Rob Carter here speaking a number of times, and actually he is coming this month later on. He'll be here on the 23rd of October to speak on a topic. And the other two, Carter is a geneticist, and the other two are actually also physicists like I am, but a different field of physics. But so anyway, and then on the people on the left, these are people that believe in a flat earth, and they have web pages, and they have YouTube channels, and they really promote it with all their videos. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to start with giving you the 10 topics I'm going to cover here. The flat earth concept, what is it? What do people really believe? There's also some history of people that believe in a spherical earth, some history of flat earth, what do flat earthers really say, and then more importantly, what does the Bible teach about the shape of the earth? And then I'm going to present 12 evidence that we can see that the earth is really a sphere, and then the 12 challenges I give to the flat earth people saying, how do you explain this if the earth is flat? And then there was a final experiment done in the Antarctic, actually last December, which was very definitive. I'll talk about that a bit, and then we'll draw the conclusions. So what do people believe? Well, some people, they use these verses that I have here. And by the way, I've got a lot of slides here. I can't cover everything on every slide. There's only an hour to do that. But you can always download my PowerPoint slides from my website if you want to study it further. Okay, so Isaiah, Matthew, Chronicles, Samuel. The earth rests on pillars, for example, in Samuel 2:28. What does that mean? So this is the model according to the Bible. Flat earthers say there's a dome, there's a flat earth, and it's resting on something. That's basically what their model is. But here's some other pictures. It's the earth, according to them, is flat, but there's a dome over top of it about 3,000 miles high that you can't go beyond. Okay, and this gives you a better view. Our domed earth with a firmament. And you can see the sun and the moon, but they are within this dome. And they are just a little less than 3,000 miles up, supposedly. And you can see they're the same size. Well, we can see the sun and moon are the same size for a spherical Earth model as well. And then how do they deal with the different time zones? Because obviously things go, the sun rises at different times at different parts of the Earth. So they invented this spotlight They said there's a spotlight, that sun, okay, is shining on just a part of the earth, and it's moving around, revolving around the top of the earth. That's how that flat earth people, and this is how it shows. It shows the sun and moon. Of course, they have, the sun has a 1-day cycle, the moon has 28 plus or minus days, different cycles. So this is an approximation of how they get, the sun to shine on a part of the earth at a different time. And then they've come up with a standard map of the world where it's really, it's 25,000 miles around the circumference here. And I'm not going to get into this because this is a projection. It's not, you can't take measurements from this here. You can see Australia down here looks to be quite large, and it's because of their model. And I'll explain that. So here's the summary of the concept. The Earth is stationary. It's stationary. It's not moving. 25,000 miles diameter. Dome is about 3,000 miles above the Earth. Sun, moon are each 32 miles in diameter. How do they know that? Well, it fits their model. The sun and moon actually orbit around the northern axis above the Earth, under the dome. The stars and the 5 visible planets are actually in the dome, okay, because you can see them. You don't need a telescope to see those stars out there or what else is in there. So but that's all in the dome. It's not beyond the dome, it's in the dome. And this is the real strange one. Antarctic is not a continent, it's actually a wall around the disk here, and you cannot go beyond that wall. That's their model. Okay, and so the North Pole, they do believe in a North Pole at the center there, but there is no South Pole in this map, and they use the Gleason Standard Map. So getting into some of the histories, first I'm going to cover the history of people that believed in a spherical Earth. And when I started to look at this, I was very surprised on what they already knew, the Greek and the Roman astronomers. So Pythagoras, 570, 495 BC, he said there were 8 concentric spheres surrounding the Earth, and you see them here. 5 planets in the other sphere, other than the Earth. Okay, and you can see the moon is a different sphere, and then the sun is a different sphere further out, and there are 5 planets that we can see with the naked eye. So that's how they pictured it. So then came another astronomer, and so he proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis. There's nothing in the Bible that talks about that at all, but this is what he surmised. And then there was even a philosopher, Greek astronomer, who believed in a heliocentric model. The geocentric model with the Earth in the middle. That was believed by many different people, and in fact was believed up until the time of Galileo, about 1500 AD. So, but this astronomer came up with it could be heliocentric. Okay, and then the other thing, they came up with they had some very good math in the early days. And so they used a parallax method to try and determine the distance of some of these bodies away from the Earth. And so what you can do, assuming the sun is in the middle, 6 months between, you're at a different place respective to the star. Okay, and then you can, there's an angle here, and you can measure the distance here. With all that, do some arithmetic, and you'll come up with a distance to the star that you see here. So that was known back in even 160 AD. Okay, then the amazing thing is this. Here comes the Greek astronomer Eratosthenes of Cyrene, who lived BC, 276 to 194 BC. He was the first person to calculate the circumference of the Earth, to estimate the circumference. So how did he do that? Well, let me just skip right to it here. So there's a well in Syene, in North Africa there, and it's a very deep well, and it's vertical. So when the sun is above it on the equator, I mean, it goes straight in. So, but then if you go a little bit further to Alexandria, which is not on the equator, and you have a tall pole here, you can see the angle there. And it happened to be about 7 degrees angle out of the 360. So using that and a little bit of math, he calculated the circumference of the Earth was about 24,000 miles, 40,000 kilometers. So he came very, very close to that. So this, assumes a spherical Earth model, of course. And then, of course, for the longest time, Ptolemy was an Alexandrian astronomer and mathematician. He came up with the Earth-centric, geocentric model with the Earth in the middle, the moon going around it, and the sun up there, and everything moves around the Earth. Now you can live with that model, but after a while, it gets very complex dealing with all the epicycles that you have to consider. So without the telescope, you can see from the Earth the Sun, the Moon, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, Mercury, and Saturn. These are going from the brightest to the dimmest bodies out there. And you can see the movement across the sky from the Earth. I mean, they are moving relative to the Earth. So they've learned a lot by this time, early AD. And I'll skip right to Copernicus. He was the one that really got serious about the heliocentric model. And so he developed a model independent of the earlier astronomers. And he said, according to the Greeks, all orbits are circular. So that's why they have circles here, perfect circles. The Greek thought everything was a perfect circle. So the sun at the center and the Earth, not the Earth. So the sun is now at the center, and everything else is orbiting the sun. So, and the stars do not move with respect to each other. So he actually wrote a book on this here, and a very smart fellow. He also formulated some economic principles. Then came along Galileo, and let's see, Copernicus now, and Galileo came after that. He's the one that invented the telescope in 1608. And he actually, well, he wasn't the one, but he improved the telescope to be able to see stars out there, even see the Jupiter rings, the lunar craters. And so he really championed the Copernican heliocentrism, with the sun at the center. And of course, that was a real problem for the Catholic Church initially. But anyway, then he also came up with the 3 laws of planetary motion. And it turns out those laws of planetary motions are not perfect circle, they're actually elliptical. So they're becoming very careful how to measure that. So he discovered all the planets move in ellipses. Okay, so that's a little bit about the spherical history. So most people believed in a spherical Earth at that time. And then along came Samuel Rowbotham. Okay, there were some ancient cultures that did believe in a flat Earth, but the church fathers never taught flat Earth. And in fact, they didn't say a whole lot about the shape of the Earth because it wasn't relevant. But here came Samuel Rowbotham. He was convinced that the Earth was flat, and so he ran an experiment in 1838 AD based on the Bedford level experiment. And what that is, I'll show you in the next picture. He also published a pamphlet with some, he called it zetetic astronomy, saying the Earth is not a globe. Okay, it's flat. And so I'll talk about that in a bit. Others joined the flat Earth movement in the late 1800s. some more books published in the early, even up to the mid-1900s. So, but then the interest in the flat Earth concept dropped off after that. And Eric Dubay, who I showed on that front slide, he's a flat Earth guru, okay? He teaches yoga in Thailand. He's not a believer, so he hooked into this flat Earth model and said, I'm going to write about that. So he wrote a book called 200 Proofs That the Earth is Not a Spinning Ball in 2015. And that's available on the internet. I've looked at some of those 200 proofs, and of course there are many assumptions that just don't make sense. And so then the interest in the flat Earth increased via YouTube videos. This was taught by non-believers as well as believers. And you'd be surprised how many YouTube videos are out there. I've talked and corresponded with a number of flat earthers to see why they think the way they do. And they try to convince me that the Earth is flat. And what they want to do is they want you to watch a YouTube video which proves that the Earth is flat. But of course, all the assumptions are wrong. But you can spend a lot of time looking at these videos and not learn a thing from them. Okay, so here's the experiment. He picked a part of the Bedford here canal, which happens to be, he picked a part of that canal. I mean, it looks pretty flat out there, miles out. And he picked a 6-mile segment, and then he used a telescope 8 inches above the water to see if he could still see a small boat that he put on the water that would go 6 miles away. And lo and behold, he could still see it after 6 miles. And that you shouldn't be able to see that according to the math of a spherical Earth. So based on that, he assumed that the Earth was flat because he could see the boat 6 miles out. Then along came Alfred Wallace in 1870. There was a bet out there saying, somebody proved that the Earth really is not flat. How can you prove it? Well, he came up with this experiment. Well, first of all, I should say in this here, the reason why he could see that far is because there's a physical notion of refraction, atmospheric refraction. In other words, the light travels, I'll show you here. If you go from one medium to another and it's denser, then the light actually bends. So that allows you, for example here, if you're on the top of on any part of the Earth here, you can look out and see the sun, for example, or other objects. But basically, because of the refraction, the light bends, and you can actually, see it. You can see it, but it's actually out here because of the action of refraction. So the atmospheric refraction is a deviation of light or electromagnetic wave from a straight line as it passes through the atmosphere. So the density of the air decreases with height above the Earth's surface. So that allows you, because these different layers of the atmosphere allows you to see further than you actually would be able to do. So what did Wallace do? Turns out he was a land surveyor. So he knows what he's doing. Turns out one of our sons is a land surveyor, and so he knows about this. So what he did was he said, okay, let's take those 6 miles, and I'm going to have a pole that is, I think it was 13 feet up to avoid the effect of atmospheric refraction, because then the density is about the same at all those places. So he said, if the Earth is really flat, and I use the telescope at 13 feet up, I should see the middle one at 3 miles, and also the far one at 6 miles. Okay, it is straight line. But if the Earth is curved, then I'm going to see it this way. 6 miles out, yes, I can see that. But then this pole in the middle, it will not see the top, it'll see a number of feet down. So that proves that the Earth is spherical. What more proof do you need? There's another one, geography teacher, he ran the same experiment and also showed Earth curvature. And this has been taught in the schools all along till about, well, it's still being taught, but there's people that believe that the Earth is flat. So who are these proponents? Well, I showed you on the picture on the first slide, Eric Dubé. He produced many flat Earth videos starting in 2010. He's not a believer. He's a New Age, neo-Nazi, and teaches yoga in Thailand. Mark Sargent is actually from the Whitby area, and he puts out a lot of YouTube videos. There's a Flat Earth Dave. Okay, he puts out a lot of videos trying to show that the Earth really is flat. And then they claim, the flat earthers claim that Dr. Michael Heiser, who is has a doctorate in theology, that he taught that the Earth was flat, but no. He said, no, I don't believe the Earth is flat at all. But there is a pastor in Alabama who now, Pastor Dean Ottle, he puts out videos on why the Earth is flat. And there are a lot of people who are deceived by those, his sermons on that. You can find him on YouTube, just looking for Dean Ottle. So there are, proponents out there. So what do these people say that believe in a flat Earth? Well, they say gravity makes no sense. The law of gravity, no, that's not how things stay up. They stay through buoyancy and density. Okay, this cup here is staying up here because it's resting on the surface, and it's denser than the air. So if I put it over here, it's going to fall down. It's not gravity. It's buoyancy and density. And water doesn't curve. Water finds its own level. And they ask the question, how can water stick to a ball spinning at 1,000 miles per hour? I mean, if you think about the Earth revolving, it's 24 hours, and the circumference is 25,000 miles. You really are moving at 1,000 miles per hour. So how can water stick to that? And it's all because of gravity, of course. Water cannot flow up. I mean, if the north was higher than further down, then how can water run up? And so it's the wrong thinking on gravity. So, and they're perplexed about how the Earth's atmosphere exists next to a vacuum of space. Remember that dome? They don't believe that anything is beyond that dome. Okay, so let me see. And they treat science as a religion. They don't believe in real science. Okay, that's scientism. They said, we know what the science is. And we all have been indoctrinated by government and teachers, etc. So it's indoctrination. That's why you don't believe the Earth is flat. Okay, so then I talked about Eric Dubé again. He wrote that book, 200 proofs, and you can find them all on the net. And I can show you, the errors of his way in many of those. There's another book that was written in the previous century, and he only had 100 proofs. So Eric Dubé outdid him with twice as many. So what does the Bible teach? And this is very important. There turn out to be about 200 verses that flat earthers claim support a flat Earth. Many of these verses deal with other issues, different from whether the Earth is flat or spherical, geocentric or heliocentric. So, so they pick these verses, but the problem is they don't deal with context, because they apply something that is out of context to the flat Earth, and that doesn't work. And they have to realize that there are many books of the Bible that are, there's some history that is poetic and allegorical, so they're written for a different audience. Meaning depends on context, of course, grammatical or literary. Many allege flat Earth verses from poetic books. Some allege flat Earth verses talk about the land, not the planet. Okay, use of equivocal idiomatic language. And sometimes they cherry pick verses not found in all translations. I mean, in some translations you can say, well, look, this translation shows it that earth is flat, but in others it doesn't. Flat earth was never taught throughout church history, and that's very important. So due to the work of Dr. Carter, who's going to be here later this month, and Dr. Sarfetti from CMI, Creation Ministries International, they did an analysis of these 200 verses and said, put them in 3 different classes. The first class was, well, they have nothing to do with the flat earth at all. It's just out of context. And some verses that are ambiguous in relation to the shape of the earth, using equivocal language. And then the third class, verses that involve a misreading of non-modern English terminology in some older versions, of the translations of the Bible. And they're often cherry-picked. And in classical terms, this is called lying. I mean, it's not true. So I'm going to pick 4 different phrases found in the Bible that they use. You've heard the phrase 4 corners of the earth. Okay. Now, if there's if the earth is a sphere, where are the corners? They don't exist. If it's flat and it's a disc, where are the corners? There are no corners. Okay, and these are just a few of the examples. There's very few, this phrase here. The next one they misuse is the ends of the earth. That phrase appears 28 times in the Bible. And for example, may God bless us still so that all the ends of the earth will fear him. Context, what does it mean? What do you mean, the ends of the earth? The flat earthers will say, look, there's an end of the earth, there's that disk, and if you go beyond that, who knows what happens. So, but it's not talking about the shape of the earth, it's talking about people at the ends of the earth. So people are all over the earth. Okay, so that does not refer to geography, but to people. And then another one is pillars, and this isn't used a whole much, but he shakes the earth out of its place, and its pillars tremble. And a few others here. Many of these verses found in poetic books, and they use imagery and non-literal language to interpret them. So this, again, does not prove a flat earth. Now, the most difficult one is this 4th one here, the Hebrew word rakia. Okay, this is interpreted as a dome over the earth in the flat earth view. So the dome is the firmament that you see in Genesis chapter 1, verses 6 to 8. They use the word firmament. But later translations, they take raka, which is the verb part of this here. It means to spread out. So most English translations use this phrase, the expanse. So that's the expanse, and that's the the Earth's atmosphere and the space beyond it. So it's the expanse. So that's how it's interpreted So that doesn't help the flat Earth explanation either. So there are verses that could be interpreted as that the Earth is a sphere. Isaiah 40, verse 22. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain. And this one really, Job 26, 7. He stretches out the north over the void and hangs the earth on nothing. It's not resting on the back of a turtle or an elephant. It's hanging out there on nothing. He has inscribed a circle on the face of the waters. Okay, so there are verses which would favor a spherical verse shape, but they don't know how to treat those properly. Okay, then and I also in my notes on my website I refer to a theologian who did a very detailed analysis of the verses of the Bible that were used by flat earthers, 6 different messages, and he determined that he's in agreement with what Carter and Sarfetti have to say about that, and I am too. I read that in detail. So now I'm going to go to So why do we believe the Earth is spherical? Okay, I'm going to go through 12 different evidence that I use. So the approach here is, in your notes, you can take one of the, or three of these 12 and say which ones is most convincing to you. Okay, so I'm going to step through all 12 of these quickly here. So first of all, you're familiar with the notion of a ship disappearing over the horizon as it moves away from the shore. You see the hull going down, and that's an indication of the Earth being spherical. In fact, you can use mathematics to determine how far the ship could go before it disappears in sight. So there's a calculation which I won't go into here, but it can be calculated like 1 mile out, it's only 8 inches the ship would have gone down, and 6 miles out, it would be 24 feet, and 30 miles, much further yet. So if you're 30 miles out, you wouldn't see a ship at all. And there's a refraction involved. You got to take that into consideration. So then you see this, and this is an example from, if you look from Olcott, New York to Toronto, and they are both on opposite sides of Lake Ontario, and the distance between that is about 39 miles. The height of the CN Tower there is 1,815 feet. However, you'll notice here, you only see the top part of it. So there's 603 feet that you do not see, okay? And so this is an indication that it's spherical because it's dropping off. And it does, you can calculate the refraction that might occur in this too, depending on the many different things. So the atmospheric refraction is something that needs to be considered, but it's not constant. It's not the same. It depends on the weather and different days and temperature and all that. If there's low refraction, it's not much refraction, you can see the whole building. Okay, if there's some refraction, medium, you can see a part of it, like I showed in the previous picture. And if there's high refraction, then the entire building would be visible. So the point that showed in the last slide, was a certain weather and temperature. So it depends on that. You'll notice I choose a bunch of articles here from flatearth.ws. And so it talks about refraction variability. There are a few hundred different articles which explain much of what the Earth, the flat earthers believe is not correct from a science point of view. Second, I'm sure you've seen lunar eclipses, and the view is, you have the shadow of the Earth. And of course, as the eclipse proceeds, you can see the shadow covers just part of the moon, and it moves across. And you'll notice there's a slight curvature and there. So you can see the curvature of the Earth is the shadow there. Okay, so, and this is a hard one with the flat earthers. I mean, the total solar eclipse, it doesn't happen very often, but we know exactly when it's going to happen because we can project it from the, from the distances between all the bodies out in space here. So we know the size of the Earth, we know, where the moon is at all times, and we know where the sun is. And so if you have the sun coming down and the moon is in the right place here, you can get a full total solar eclipse. And you can tell exactly where it's going to be. Okay, normally they're about 80 to 100 feet within that measurement. And typically the shadow is a number of miles, I think maybe 100 miles or so, but it's less at the edges. But in the middle, it's a total solar eclipse. So with the math of these moving bodies, you can calculate exactly where the eclipse is going to occur and when it's going to occur. You ask a flat earther, how do you explain that? Because the moon and the sun are supposedly the same size, and they're revolving within the dome. How do you get the moon in between the sun? The sun is not big enough there, and the Earth. It can't happen. You cannot explain it in a flat Earth model. So if you look out in space, you can see that the other planets, they appear to be spherical. I mean, the moon appears to be spherical. The sun appears to be spherical. So we'd expect the Earth to be spherical as well. So we can see classical planets. The classical planets are the ones that I discussed before, that you can see with the naked eye. And with the sun in the middle, you know where all of these planets are going to be. And sometimes those planets can be aligned exactly. You cannot explain that in a flat Earth. Discovering the need for time zones. In the early days, people didn't have to travel very far, and they couldn't travel very far. So if you're going to travel a few hundred miles away, and you're going to spend a few days to get that far, you don't notice the difference in when the sun rises. But if you travel multiple time zones, you know that you have to take the time into consideration. But the time zones weren't introduced until the 18th century. But here is a believer, John Sacrobosco, in the 13th century. He said that the earth too is round is shown thus. The signs and stars do not rise and set at the same time for all men everywhere, but rise and set sooner for those in the east than in those in the west. And of this there is no other cause than the bulge of the earth. So even back then, believers knew that the earth was a sphere. And of course, you go high enough above the earth, you can see the curvature there. Here's a picture of the Earth and the Moon from Apollo 11, which landed on the Moon. And of course, flat earthers will say, no, that didn't happen. That was photoshopped. Well, this was in 1969. We didn't know how to do photoshopping, so I believe it. And as I tell some people, we were fortunate enough to observe that. And we happened to be in the Netherlands at the time, visiting some relatives. And so we watched it on Dutch TV, not on CNN, so we know it's true. Okay, then you have the International Space Station. It is up there. Many people don't even know it's up there. And it is traveling, it's 250 miles up there. It's traveling at 17 plus thousand miles per hour. And it takes about 90 minutes to get around. And there are, astronauts are part of that. Snapshot of Earth from the International Space Station, 250 miles up. Obviously, you're going to see a curve. And here you have astronauts outside of it. And the old Hubble Space Telescope, told us a lot about the shape of the Earth. It was 335 miles above and a period of 95 minutes. And it's been in space for 30 years there. And today we have, you may have heard about the James Webb Space Station. It is actually more, about 1 million miles away from the Earth. Why that far? Because then you don't have to look through all the space dust and interference, so you get a much better picture. And we're finding out some very surprising things that secular scientists do not expect to find. And this is very supportive of the creation model as well. Now, you may have seen this pendulum. You may have gone to some museums to see this pendulum. It goes back and forth. What does that tell us? Well, you start in time, zero. It starts, it goes back and forth like this. Well, I should say like this, back and forth. But then if you wait a few hours, it's actually moved and going back and forth this way. And why does that happen? Because the Earth is actually rotating. So that is the pendulum effect. Then there's another effect, the Coriolis effect, which is more complicated, but that's also due to the rotation of the Earth. And this is probably the best way to understand it. some of you may have seen it. Water in a pan, sink, or toilet rotates counterclockwise, in the northern hemisphere. If you go to Australia, it goes the other way. And in between, it's not as severe, but in the further north, it's more obvious it's going counterclockwise. And so I won't go into all the science behind that, but that's a very observable thing. And the same thing goes with the, in the northern hemisphere, the hurricanes, they go counterclockwise. In the southern hemisphere, they go clockwise. So the typhoons go in a different direction. So again, this Coriolis effect is very supportive of a spherical Earth. Then you have another one that is very obvious, the celestial poles. If you look at the Earth, there's a North Pole and a South Pole, and you have the North Star up here, the North Pole, North Star. And so if you're up here, close to there, you can see the North Star in the northern hemisphere all the time, but you can't see the South celestial pole from the northern hemisphere. So because of the sphere, certain stars are visible in the north that are not visible in the south, and also vice versa. I mean, ask a flat earther to explain that. They can't. It's impossible. So here again, those stars, they revolve around celestial poles in opposite directions. In the northern hemisphere, they go anti-clockwise. And I've got a video which demonstrate that, which I'm not going to show here, but if you get my slide, you can click on that, and it'll show you 2 minutes of how the stars are going against the clock in the northern hemisphere, and the south, they're going the different direction. So those are the 12 things that I say show that the Earth is a sphere. And there are others as well, other experiments you can, but this should be enough. And so you can mark down the top 3 that you think really show that the Earth is a sphere. And then we look at, we give challenges to the flat Earth model, okay? And these are questions I ask of flat earthers. And of course, they cannot give me a good answer. So I'm going to walk through some of these here. Okay, the 12 different challenges to the flat earthers. Okay. So basically, the laws of nature, they don't believe in them. The physics, astronomy, Newton's law of gravity, I explained before, they don't believe that's a real law. They don't accept Newton's 3 laws of motion and the 3 laws of planetary motion, which Kepler came up with, and Snell's law of refraction that we talked about. So all of these laws of nature that we know are true, they just don't accept. Okay, so these in a little bit more detail, Newton's 3 laws of motion, you might remember this from school, and if you've been out of school, you don't remember that. But you certainly remember the law of gravity. The force is equal to the gravitational constant times the mass of the first body, times the mass of the second body, divided by the distance between those 2 bodies squared, okay? And that can be measured and is well accepted. And then Kepler's laws of planetary motion, he came up with 3 different laws, and these are a little bit more complex. But he shows that the planets orbit around the sun in an elliptical pattern, not a circular. And the second one, the law of equal areas that they cover. And the third law, relation between orbital period of planets and planets' distance from the sun. And of course, these make no sense to the flat earther because you don't, they can't have planets out there. Ocean tides, how do you explain that? There are certain places where you can really observe it. You can go to Bellingham north of there, you can look at the ocean, the tides coming in and out. What causes the tides? Well, the force of the moon, but also the force of the sun. They both have some impact, and it's pretty up there. You can pretty well predict when it's going to come in and when it's going to go out. So, but both the sun and the moon have some impact on that. And again, if you look at Dubé's writing and look at proof number 17 and 18, 118, he doesn't have a clue. He cannot explain that, how that happens. Because if the Earth is flat, and you got a small sun, 32 miles in diameter, I mean, on the big Earth of 8,000 miles across and 25,000 circumference, I mean, it's going to have no pull. So they can't explain that. And so, you know this very well. I mean, here's a boat. The tide is in and the tide is back out. And here's one that I can relate to. I chose this here because when I was in business and lived in the LA area, I'd had a flight to Boston almost once a month. And so I became very aware that to fly from Los Angeles to Boston, 5.5 hours, but going back, let me see, going back, returning flight from Boston to Los Angeles, 6 hours and 20 minutes. Why is that? It's because of the circuits, the wind circuits up in that atmosphere. So they hold it back, when you're coming home. And that's measurable. How can flat earthers explain that? They can't. There's just too big of a difference there. So the other one thing, sometimes the planets are aligned very well. In fact, on June 3rd of last year, these 6 planets were aligned. Now, with a flat Earth model, they're in that dome and they're fixed. I mean, there's no way you can see them as aligned. And here's another one, the size of the sun and the moon. I mean, in a spherical Earth, we know that the diameter is 8,000 miles and circumference is 25,000. The moon diameter, we know the sun is 400 times the size of the moon, and that's why we can have total solar eclipses. The sun is 109 times the size of the Earth. Sun is 93 million miles away. The moon is 239,000 miles from the Earth. And the stars are outside of the solar system. I mean, they're much further away than it's not within the dome. So the flat Earth concept, the Earth is a round disk, 25,000 miles in diameter. The dome is 3,000 miles above the Earth. Sun and moon are each about 32 miles in diameter. So the sun and moon rotate above the Earth under the dome, and of course they do it at different frequencies. The moon moves much slower. Stars and the 5 visible planets are in the dome. That's the flat Earth concept. So then we have this sunspot sun issue. So in the flat Earth model, the sun's distance from an observer can change. But see now, because with the sun here, the spotlight sun moving around here, now if you live here, the distance to the sun is much larger than if you lived right under the sun. In fact, the sun size observed should be different by 6 times in a flat Earth, depending on where you are on the Earth. And we know when we look at the sun and moon in the sky, they're always the same size. It doesn't vary that much. And sunrise, sunset, again, you could be 6 times larger overhead if it was flat. But of course, if it's not flat, it always looks the same. And here, some more spotlight sun issues. The sun, moon rotate in the sky without gravity. How do you explain that? I mean, even with the flat Earth model, why does the sun and the moon stay up there if there's no gravity? They can't explain that. Sunrise, sunset are never below the horizon. Can't explain what caused the lunar eclipse. Can't predict start, stop, or or trajectory of a solar eclipse. They have no way of predicting that. And during sunrise, we observe the top of the mountain illuminated before the foothills. If you come, you're in an area where there's a high mountain, the sun would hit the top of the mountain before the valley. And in a flat Earth, it can't be that way. And in the spotlight issue, you can never illuminate the ice wall at the same time, because the ice wall is it's around the whole disk. So you can see it's only, in their model, it's only shedding light on a part of the Antarctic. And then you come to spotlight sun cannot explain solstice. I'm going to go to the next picture here. It shows it better. You have the sun here. You have in June, you have the Tropic of Cancer here, and you can see that the sun would shine on the top, the north of the pole, and in the winter, you should also see it in the South Pole. I mean, the sun would stay up 24 hours. And again, flat earthers have no way of explaining that. Okay, and these are just some more. And I talked about this before, the flat earth eclipse predictions, it cannot predict. If you, last year, if you wanted to be somewhere where the solar eclipse was happening, you knew exactly where you had to be to do that. There's no way that the flat earth can explain that at all. The other thing that they don't believe in is all these satellites, the communication satellites above, and there are many types of satellites, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to focus on the GPS. You know what GPS does for us. And so you have all these different types of orbits, but the GPS, there are 24 satellites revolving around the Earth twice at an altitude of 12,500 miles above the Earth. That's above the dome, which, flat Earth, that can't possibly be. I asked a flat earther that, and he said, well, it's programmed into your cell towers. Okay, so it's because the cell towers get your phone signals, so that's how it's done. Well, show me the program. They can't show me that. So why is this important? So it provides geolocation and time info to the GPS receivers anywhere on the Earth. So if you are any place on the Earth, you can see 3 or 4 of these satellites at the same time. And the other thing, because it is so far up, you have to take care of the light traveling in that distance. If you did not take that into consideration, you would lose 38 microseconds faster per day. So if you didn't make that correction, GPS calculated position would accumulate errors of up to 6 miles per day. So it's a very special calculation to do that, and that's how this GPS system works. There's no way to explain that in a flat Earth. In other words, land surveying, I talked about that. My son is a land surveyor, and he can verify this. He's got some of these documents. But basically, if you're doing land surveying on just a plot of land or something, you don't have to make these corrections because the difference is so small. But if you do have to do a larger area, then you have to make corrections for curvature of the Earth and for refraction. Another example is, this is the battleship guns. If you have to shoot, another ship here, you don't shoot it out horizontally. You got to shoot it slightly, at an angle, so you can hit that ship. Okay, and so all those calculations are known. In fact, there are tables of that, range tables that the U.S. Navy uses to calculate exactly the direction you should shoot in. And then we come to the Antarctic. I mean, we regard Antarctica, to be, it can't be an ice wall. It actually is the 5th largest continent. So it's all in one piece. And the other thing to And there's the South Pole. They don't believe the South Pole exists. And the area here has been given to certain countries to run experiments with or do whatever they want with, and this laid out in this way. So this is what it looks like in practice. And here's a picture of Antarctica taken from a spacecraft. So the flat Earth assumptions, to make their model work, they have to make basic assumptions. If their assumptions are wrong, their model's going to be wrong. So gravity is not a law of nature, they say. Well, then you're going to get strange results too. Earth is stationary, does not rotate. Space does not exist beyond the dome at all, they would say. And they say nothing can orbit the Earth. I mean, there's nothing, because it's enclosed. The dome keeps everything in, and there's an ice wall that keeps you in as well. So Newton's 3 laws of motion are fake. Kepler's 3 laws of planetary motion are fake. There are no satellites. There are space stations up there. That's all lies told by NASA. Astronauts have not been to the moon. NASA lied about everything they claimed regarding the moon landing, as well as even the International Space Station. They can't assume that it exists. So all the photos from space are fake. And the Antarctic is an ice wall around the Earth disk. That's their assumptions. So here's an experiment. Actually, a pastor in Colorado came up with this experiment, challenged the flat earthers. He said, if the Earth is flat, okay, let me see, that you could not have a 24-hour sun if the Earth is flat. Okay, remember it's a funnel. So, but if it is spherical, you can have a 24-hour sun. So they challenged a few flat earthers to come there, and a few people that believed in the spherical Earth, and ran that experiment. That's what that final experiment is. And so what did they find? That that at a certain point in time, in the winter solstice, the sun did shine for 24 hours. And so that should have proved them. A few of the flat earthers said, yeah, it shows that the sun does shine there 24 hours. One of the flat earthers said, okay, I'll believe in the spherical Earth. And the other said, yes, I see the sun did shine there. I'm going to go away and try and explain that. So I haven't heard the answer from that yet. This was run in December of last year. So the other thing that this shows is here, these are real places on here, on the Antarctica. And there's a few camps that they used. So they know exactly where they are. So if you put them on the circle, I mean, the distance between them is different. I mean, thousands of miles where they're actually just a few hundred miles apart. And so they can't explain that. So conclusion, some ancient cultures did believe in a flat Earth. The Bible text did not require a flat Earth. Observations from the 5th century BC to the 19th century show the Earth to be a rotating sphere. I mean, everybody believed that. And then an incomplete experiment by Rowbotham in 1838 renewed the interest in a flat Earth model, but his experiment did not show what he said it showed. Scientific observations show the Earth to be a sphere. The flat Earth model fails to explain observations, and the wide use of social media. Everything is out there on social media and YouTube, so that message keeps on getting out there. Assumptions made by flat earthers cannot be verified. Spherical Earth is supported by the Bible and by science. So why do these people believe in a flat Earth? It's because I claim they were deceived by Rowbotham, Samuel Rowbotham, in 1838. And he came up with this zetetic astronomy in support of that. He wrote a book on that. But the problem is, this deception These features were introduced by Stanley Rowbotham. The fact that the Earth is a flat disk centered at the North Pole, that's his idea. The Antarctic ice wall, that's his idea. And the third one, the sun as a roving spotlight covers just part of the Earth, that's his idea. That's nothing you can prove by science. That's his ideas, and they're all false ideas. And so people that believe in flat Earth were deceived by this invention. And they come up with the zetetic method of empirical observation, perspective and atmospheric effects. I won't go into all the details of that, but it's very deceiving. They have major tenets. The Earth is a stationary plane. The sun and moon, stars move above the Earth. Sun's rising, sun setting is due to perspective. There's no curvature. There's no rotation. Knowledge derived from direct observation and sensory experience. In other words, if they didn't observe it, then it can't be true. So, Antarctica wall is a boundary. Celestial bodies are not what they seem, and rejection of gravity. So with that, I'm finished right on time. But let me say just, like I said, all of the lectures that I do are on my website. The ones that I'm doing this year, you can find them on this URL right there, 2025 messages. So I will have the recording and the PowerPoint slides available for people that want to look at that in more detail. So thank you for your attention.
Let me go ahead and pray for us. So, Father, thank you again for the